once was an old woman who lived in a 2-story house at the end of the road in a small suburban town. You never really saw her that much, except when she stepped out of her house to drink her tea. From what her neighbors saw, she was a complete recluse. She always gave ugly looks to the people that looked at her, so they tended to pay her no mind. After she concluded with her tea time, she would go back inside. The strangest thing that her neighbors noticed was the playing of a piano coming through the walls and windows. Songs no one recognized always permeated through the windows and walls of her house and flowed into her neighbors' ears. The melodies were always in a minor key, making them sound haunting, and it frightened her neighbors. They couldn't really say anything about it since she was old and probably senile, so they just left her alone. She wasn't always a recluse, however. Long ago, she had more than just her piano to keep her company. She once had a life. She once had a name, Emily. Many years ago, a time far beyond the knowledge of anyone residing there now, she had moved in from the city with her husband, Daryl. On the outside, they had a perfect life together there in the little house. They were both very nice to the other residents. No one suspected any malice from them. They were especially fond of Emily. Everyone in the neighborhood loved her. They especially loved her talent for playing classical piano. She had come from the city to teach at the local elementary school and had become close to the many children who lived there. Every morning she'd play her piano. Such beautiful music it was. It conveyed her emotions perfectly. Her playing brought warmth to the world, seeping gently through the walls. Her neighbors never minded it. In fact, they enjoyed it. They felt a sense of passion echoing through plaster and brick. Sometimes the woman would be invited over to play piano for the many fans that she accumulated in the neighborhood. About a year had passed since Emily and Daryl had moved in. She had become pregnant and was expecting in about 4 more months. It seemed like everything was perfect to the neighbors that asked her about her life and her husband. They thought everything about their relationship was perfect, though they couldn't be farther from the truth. Though her music echoed happily over to her neighbors' houses, what didn't, strangely, was the yelling and screaming. Emily and Daryl fought for hours more often than people had realized. Although Daryl wasn't necessarily abusive, he had a temper and would get angry at her over little things. He was also very possessive and jealous, getting angry when any man even looked at her. Even though he hid it well when they were with company, they began fighting soon after their door shut. One day they got into an argument. Emily's husband thought she was cheating and that the baby wasn't his. She tried to peg him as delusional and slapped him, trying to snap him out of even considering that notion. Daryl reacted out of instinct and shoved her hard, which made her tumble down the stairs. With a thud, she landed on the ground with her arms spread out and a gash on her forehead. Emily awoke in a hospital bed with Daryl over her, tears flowing down his face. He told her that the doctors couldn't save her baby and that he was sorry. He held Emily close, trying to console her, but she had snapped. Her sanity had been destroyed. It had been stomped on and bloodied by the loss of her child. She let out a scream of agony and immediately passed out again. When they came home, Emily was completely silent, only crying or playing piano. But the songs were different. They sounded like the lamenting of a lost soul, haunting to the ear, paralyzing anyone who heard it with chilled fear. It was as if the screams she failed to make were expressed by the new melodies becoming louder and louder. Daryl tried many times to help her out of her trance-like state. However, it fell on deaf ears. He was forced to do everything for her, even having to force feed her. Her neighbors eventually found out what happened, and that her husband was legitimately sorry for what had happened. The friends she had gathered tried to comfort her, even trying tough love, but it was no use. She had become a shell of her former self, the color drained from her face. The only thing that was left in her mind was her music. One day Emily did start speaking again, but her voice was almost monotone and difficult to hear. She started to cook and do stuff around the house, even started to eat again with Daryl at the table. Daryl thought that she was recovering, but she was still far gone. She still didn't want to be near him, being cold and unwanting when he wanted to console her. He tried to apologize again, but she didn't listen. She just kept trying to play her piano. When she had fallen asleep on the piano, he took her to the couch and kissed her on the cheek. Then he just went to bed, still ashamed of what had happened, his eyes wet with sorrow. The next morning, Emily came to her friends in tears. She told them that Daryl had died in his sleep. They consoled her and decided to help her with the funeral arrangements. It was held a few days later. There was a crowd of people gathered at the town cemetery. Emily accepted the comfort of her friends and neighbors. A priest did the sermon, and during the burial, Emily laid flowers on his casket. She stayed silent, not wanting to be comforted by her friends. She eventually quit her job at the school and started to live in seclusion. In the days that followed, Emily's neighbors could hear her piano playing the same haunting tune, as well as a growing odor coming from her house. It smelled foul, almost making anyone who smelled it faint. Her neighbors tried to complain about the smell, but she did not answer. After days of trying, they gave up, assuming that it was just coming from their trash. As weeks passed, disappearances started happening one by one, starting with the dark music, and the foul smell became more prominent, to the point it was covering the town in the smell. The neighborhood kept hearing the haunting melodies coming from her house. Her friends decided to act. They called the police and let them know about the smell. They went over to Emily's house, and she answered them. They did a search to find anything suspicious, but nothing was ever found. This went on for many years. Children started disappearing from the neighborhood. People who moved into the neighborhood were found dead by asphyxiation in their beds. She always smiled when the police came to her house, and they always came up with nothing. The only thing that remained constant was the music still coming through. People listening swore they heard screams echoing through her playing. She eventually cut herself off from her friends and became an old crone, always looking angrily at people. She hated couples the most, always jealous about their happiness. After years of this, the smell went away for the most part. The disappearances became less and less, until finally they ended. The only thing that remained was the constant music being played constantly, as if the old woman never slept. Eventually she passed away, and nobody knew when she did. Her corpse rotted in her bed as days went by, and nobody found her. Eventually, the police did find the body and decided to bury it in the cemetery in an unmarked grave. They began to search for clues as to how she died, and eventually came across an old piano. Its keys were dusty, and the bench was knocked over on its side. One of the policemen searched around because he felt something was amiss. A certain smell that he had smelled before was faint, but lingered in the air. He eventually came across what seemed like a doormat, lying in the middle of the living room, where the smell was more prominent. He lifted it up carefully and found what looked like a weird indentation in the floor. He started to feel around it and found an edge of something. He pulled every which way and uncovered a hole in the ground, leading into darkness. The policeman shined his flashlight to reveal a horrifying sight. Many human skeletons of men, women, and children were seen laid inside. It was a Friday evening, and my family and I were in the living room watching a movie. The dogs were looking out the window yet again. This was probably their favorite thing to do at home. However, the blinds on the window were individual plaster strips that could get stuck together when moved, so when the dogs poked their heads through to look out, the blinds usually became stuck. It got a little annoying. The dogs started to bark at the window. It was probably yet another cat, so we shushed them to go elsewhere. As the dogs left the window, I hesitantly walked up to the blinds to close them yet again. I grabbed one of the blinds and peeked out the window. There stood the tree my grandfather had planted many years ago, when they built the house, and the tire swing my father had set up long ago. I smiled, but then realized something was off. There was a black figure in the middle of the yard. I stared at it, trying to figure out whether it was real or not. The figure looked as if it were a woman. She began to look up. My eyes widened as I realized she was looking at me too. As she came closer, I froze when I saw that she didn't have a nose or cheeks. Her face was decomposing. Her forehead was almost gone. I gasped in terror as her mouth opened, and from a distance, I could see that her teeth appeared to be rotten. I couldn't move. The woman walked toward the window. With each step she took, she disappeared and reappeared. I backed away from the window and ran to my room, screaming. I could hear my dad yelling, "What's the matter with you, boy?" I put my desk chair against my door and hid in my closet. In the safety of my room, I realized I had left my parents and the dogs in the living room, vulnerable. It was too late. I heard the window shatter and my mother screaming. Then I heard my dad scream in agony. The dogs were barking and snarling, but they were soon silenced. I could hear my mother running down the hallway, screaming, and I held my mouth with my hands, trying to muffle the sounds of my cries. I heard a thump near my bedroom door, like a heavy object hitting the ground. I thought to myself, my dad has been mutilated. My mom has been decapitated. The dogs have been killed. I heard my doorknob rattling. Eric? Eric? It was my mother. Did she kill that thing? I sat in my closet, frozen, unsure what to do. Eric, honey, are you in there? Sweetie, are you okay? Open the door, please, Eric. Please, she pleaded. My throat tightened. Was that really my mother? I slowly opened my closet door. My heart was racing, my stomach aching. I crept toward the door, shaking when I heard a soft mumble. Eric, don't open the door. I stopped. I froze. I said, Mom. Silence. I could hear nothing. I stood at my door for what seemed like forever. I slowly moved the chair from the door. I turned the knob. I slowly opened the door. I peeked my head out. Nothing. I slowly inched down the hallway into the living room. There was my family watching the movie. I was confused. What had just happened? I ran up to my father, but as I got closer, I realized he was lifeless, propped back up on his chair. I turned to see that my mother's head had been put back in place, and my dogs were placed on the edge of the couch as if they were sleeping. Panting, I quickly turned around to get out of my house. As I turned, there she stood, behind me, waiting. She smelled of burnt flesh, her body covered in blood, her eyes hollow, and her hair long and matted. She leaned toward me and took a deep breath. I closed my eyes in fear. I was frozen again. Nothing. I opened my eyes, and she was gone. 12 years later, I still see this woman. She haunts me. She appears at the grocery store, at the library, across the street, in the faces of other people, in my dreams, everywhere. So tonight, I decided to take my own life. I cannot live with this torment any longer. It has been a long day. You've just spent the entire day at work or school, with students, friends, family, co-workers, etc. You make your way home by train. It's very late and lonely at the station. Nothing new. You've always traveled late at night alone. However, tonight will be different. As the train stops to pick you up, you enter one of the cars and sit down. You are alone in the solitary car, with no one in the cars behind or in front of you. Or so you think. You look around and see a beautiful woman dressed in black from head to toe. Her long dark hair is tucked into her coat, and her gaze is fixed on the floor. She wasn't on the train when you entered, so you stare at her for a while. When you turn your gaze elsewhere and then look back, you notice she has moved closer. You blink for a split second. Suddenly she's sitting next to you. Her gaze is still fixed on the floor as she smiles and says in a smooth voice like silk and honey, "I love riding the train at night. Don't you?" This is where your life teeters on the edge of death. This woman is known as the train woman. If you say no to the train woman, she will calmly stand up, grab you with incredible strength, and fling you out of the train. Your body will be thrown onto the tracks, killing you instantly but painfully. Your bones will shatter, your muscles will be torn and mashed like goo. The skin on your body will be gone. All that remains will be blood, covering your remains. You'd be considered unlucky if you somehow lived through it. If you say yes, she will grab you in a chokehold and squeeze your neck so tightly that your head will literally explode. Your skull will smash and your brain will be scattered across the train floor. The only way to survive the train woman is to give her an indirect answer or bring up a subject unrelated to the situation. For example, if you answer, "I don't like trains," she may excuse herself and calmly walk to the next car, disappearing forever. Though in most cases, if you ignore her, she will kill you. Give her a non-committal answer, and she will become confused, walk all the way to the last car, and jump off into the darkness. It is said that the train woman was once an ordinary woman who rode the train alone every night after work. But one night, she was violently attacked by a group of drunken men. She became a vengeful spirit, haunting passengers who rode the trains late at night. Another version claims she was a very lonely and depressed woman, tired of being alone. She committed suicide on the train after losing her job and facing eviction. In a different story, she was married to a cruel, abusive man who left her for a younger lover. She went insane and spent the final hours of her life in a lonely train car. Other tales say she doesn't just haunt trains, but also lonely train stations at night. If you fail to answer her question correctly, it's believed she may push you onto an oncoming train or throw you across the station, your body smashing painfully against a wall with a sickening thud. According to police reports and live witnesses, archived records from 1967 detailed mysterious train deaths. The victims were either beheaded or crushed by oncoming trains. In 1937, a missing persons report was filed for a woman who always rode the train late at night. Her body was never found, yet many who took the train around the same time reported seeing her dressed in black, eyes fixed on the floor. In 1985, a young girl was taking the train home when she noticed a woman dressed in black sitting beside her. Frightened, she left the car and ran to the conductor, begging him to stop the train. The conductor refused and kept driving. When she returned, she found blood smeared across the windows and dripping down the walls. The words, "Why did you leave me?" were smeared in red. At the final stop, as the conductor searched for any remaining passengers, he found a gruesome scene. The girl's limbs were torn apart, and her head was hanging by strands of hair from the ceiling poles. Terrified, the conductor hid the body on an abandoned track, not telling anyone what he saw. Eventually, police found the girl's body and questioned the train staff. When they searched for the conductor who had been driving that night, they found him torn apart inside the train. His head was crushed, his skin stretched so far it had torn apart. Carved into his chest were the words, "Now we will never be apart." The murder was never leaked to the media. The train woman's vengeful spirit has harmed many, and continues to do so. No one knows the real reason why. Whatever the truth is, beware as you enter the train station, as you sit and wait for the train to take you home. Watch out for the train woman. You may never be seen alive or in one piece again.